Not long after I was assigned to this parish, I went on a short vacation that kept me away for a weekend, so I made arrangements for another priest to cover the Masses. While I was away on the Saturday, at about 3 p.m., my phone rang, and I looked to see that it was the priest who was scheduled to hear confessions and celebrate Mass, and my heart sank. I just knew that he was calling to say that he forgot or was sick or wouldn't be able to be there for Mass in time. So I braced for the worst and answered. And the voice on the phone, "Dude, your church is gorgeous. Who knew it could be hidden away in a little town like this? You're so lucky." Relieved, I joined in with his excitement and expressed gratitude at what had been given to me. I shared with him, as I have with many of you, that the bishop has often called this church the prettiest church in his diocese. Since then, I've often heard visitors at weddings or funerals remark on its beauty. And I always agree with this assessment and express gratitude for being pastor here, for the chance to celebrate the sacraments in so worthy a building. What I don't do is what Jesus does right here. His disciples, many of them from small country villages, are exclaiming at the beauty of the Jerusalem temple, a building whose size and splendor vastly exceeds anything they've seen in their lives. And Jesus walks up to them and without even the slightest hesitation prophesies that the whole thing will be utterly destroyed. Talk about killing the mood. But he was right, of course. The temple is a ruin, and the Dome of the Rock stands where it once was. Jews, to this day, travel to the Wailing Wall to mourn its loss. I was blessed to visit that site as a deacon and pray at the wall. Even as a lifelong Catholic, 2,000 years after the fact, I could sense some of the immense loss felt by the descendants of God's chosen people. I can only imagine what it would be like for those who still hold to that old covenant. I felt a similar sensation when Notre Dame in Paris was burning and in danger of collapse. To those alive at the time of the temple's destruction, it must have felt like the end of the world. And that's because it was. The Jerusalem temple was designed to evoke the world as a whole, a large basin of water that symbolized the sea, floral and plant motifs in the construction to symbolize the earth and the garden. The veil of the sanctuary was embroidered with stars to symbolize the cosmos. It was the house of God, a microcosm of all creation, the site of God's promise to dwell with his people. Ancient rabbis would teach that the temple sacrifices are what powered the world to keep going. Jesus knew all of this when he prophesied as he did, and he meant what he said, because the world, as the ancients knew, did end. No longer does God need to dwell in a temple. He is dwelling there in the person of Jesus Christ, true God and true man. Jesus is the new temple. We, by the Holy Spirit, are made into temples of God himself. And yet, like the ancient Israelites, we build our wondrous temples, though for a different reason. It is not the building where God dwells, but in the Eucharist made present in the Mass, in the believers who come together to celebrate. The Eucharist reserved in the tabernacle. God dwells just as much in the dusty picks carried by a missionary priest on a dirt bike up a mountain path as he does in the 300-pound brass tabernacle that we have. Our wondrous temple is here primarily to call attention to Jesus, the God-man. And even as I strive to raise money to maintain and beautify our church through the lighting and electricity, I have to agree that a day will come when it will all be torn down, when not a brick upon another brick will be left standing. So why build? Because the world is going to end. Because we are already in the end times. Because by our perseverance, we will secure our lives. Jesus does not condemn the fact that so much time and money was spent on the Jerusalem temple. His Father commanded it to be built by the ancient Israelites, commanded it twice. He uses this stark prophecy not to reject the temple, but point to its ultimate objective, God's presence on earth, rightly recognizing that its destruction is an event of apocalyptic proportions. Jesus' disciples ask for signs to be prepared, and his answer should stir something in us. On one level, the prophecy is fairly vague and typical. Wars, famine, strife. These things are always going on somewhere, and they often lead to the destruction of buildings. But on another level, it's quite supernatural and unique. The signs in the sky that Jesus speaks of, they happened. There are records of bizarre visions and sounds coming from the sky above Jerusalem just days before it was destroyed by the Romans. In addition to what he said, Jesus promises persecution and rejection by the world, and he explains why that is a good thing. It will lead to your giving testimony to kings, governors, and everyone else. We want to think logically about what this means. If the goal of all this tribulation is the proclamation of the gospel, what does Jesus want? What is the purpose? Conversion. People accepting Christ and seeking holiness. People worshiping him. And what kinds of things do converted people, holy people, worshiping people do? What kinds of things do they build? Sacraments and places to celebrate those sacraments. The point of the destruction of the temple and the end of the world is to lead to the renewal of the world, its conversion, its reconstruction as the dwelling place of God. Like a Venn diagram, we live in the area between the old and the new. We live in the end times. We have since Jesus rose from the dead. We are simultaneously expecting what is built to be destroyed by the old world and looking for the chance to build a new world. As we strive to build and maintain beautiful buildings that will turn to dust, we ought all the more to strive to build up a kingdom of peace and justice and love, knowing the world will persecute it. So why build? Because that's what perseverance means. God doesn't expect us or ask us to succeed in making heaven on earth. He rather tells us that in the darkest hour, which is coming, heaven itself will break in to destroy evil forever. The question is this: when that day comes, will we be a part of that evil? Or will we be among its victims who rejoice at the day of fire? Because that's the only choice. And how do you stay on the right side? The side that suffers from evil rather than causing evil. By building, even though it will be destroyed. By preaching, even though you will be hated. By loving, even though you will be rejected. And by your perseverance, you will secure your lives.